But during the rush of COVID-19, certain basic best practices were ignored in the interest of time. Corners were cut, and that comes with a risk.
Point of order.
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
In the last annual Public Service Employee Survey, only 55% of our members at CBSA said they would feel comfortable initiating a formal complaint without fear of reprisal. It's hard to challenge someone when that very person you're challenging is the one that will be assessing your performance at the end of the year. Simply put, whistleblowers often become scapegoats.
In your opening statement, you referred to hearing complaints from your members at PHAC, CBSA, and PSPC. You also mentioned that members are afraid to raise complaints for fear of reprisal and will often just flag concerns and move on. Do you know who your members raised their concerns to?
We don't have the exact details, and I can tell you why. Our members are afraid. Even in preparation for this committee appearance, we sent out a survey urgently last Friday to hear from them. The survey was anonymous. People gave us information, but they didn't want to give us their name. I had a few people reach out to me personally because they knew me. He says, Danny, you cannot name me on this. They're concerned for their well-being. Blowing the whistle doesn't do you any good. So in terms of their exact involvement, they don't want to highlight it because they're concerned for their well-being.
So would your members who have concerns, if they were to raise this with someone within the organization, would it be the CFO?
Depending on which level they're at. Generally speaking, we always advise our members, raise it to your immediate supervisor. Most often that wouldn't be the CFO. Could be people at various levels. That said, I've been president since 2016. When a member tells me they've seen wrongdoing, I will tell them, raise it, document it, and then let it go. And I'm embarrassed that I have to say that to my own members. Because what I'd rather say is, we're going to fight this and we're going to help you. But because they're not protected, we have to tell them, look, you need to do the right thing. And the right thing is to raise it to the employer at any level. Raise it, document it, and then let it go. Because I can't tell you one case I've ever heard of a whistleblower that had a favorable outcome.
Thank you very much. For me, that is absolutely concerning, and yet I recognize that. Just recently, we had a colleague introduce a private member's bill in regards to whistleblowing, so I recognize that it is an issue. You also stated that less than a dozen of the 1,000 members that you have across these three departments were consulted on the ArriveCan app, and that they all raised concerns. And I think what this does is raise concerns for us. It raises two that I can think of right away. First, that so few financial officers were consulted. And secondly, that they raised concerns, but those concerns were brushed aside. This does seem to be par for the course with this current government, to disregard concerns about overspending. Have any of your members, and you may have already answered this for me, reported reprisal actions related to ArriveCan?
No, they have not. However, I think it's because they know not to push too hard, right? Look at the stories we hear in the media, what happens to whistleblowers, right? Remember, the majority of our members are accountants. They do have a code of conduct obligation to raise any anomalies. They have to do it. And I'm happy that they do that. But because we're not protecting them, it's hard for them to go further. So none of them has raised to us specifically that they've been reprised against. But when you look at the government's even own internal survey, the data is clear. Our members are saying, I don't feel comfortable raising issues. I fear reprisal.
I want to move to the point about consultants and procuring the services of consultants. And you mentioned that consultants are used, you believe, to sidestep financial accountability by replacing public servants with consultants. And in the article that you wrote, I believe it was back in 2021, You stated that at any given time, an alarming percentage of the public service workforce is in what our colleagues at PIPSC have dubbed the shadow public service. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about that shadow public service and what it is costing Canadians.
Often, when we want a project to go forward, our members can be seen as barriers, sticks in people's wheels. Oh, finance, accountants, they're not conducive, they're not helping. So how can we bypass them? We know what we want to do. Let's get the results. Okay, well, instead of going to an accountant, let's go outsource this. Go to a firm that will deliver exactly the results we're doing. I've seen members that do costing reports or financial forecasts that are being told, well, we don't like that number. Well, the number is what it is. I'm not here to give you the result that you're looking for. I'm telling you this is what the number is. So the shadow public service could be used by saying, hey, you know what? If we want to bypass the internal controls, let's outsource the work.
Thank you, Mr. Tisha. I'm sure members will come back to that. I do need to move on.
Mr. Richard, your evidence so far in the half an hour that we've listened to you, in my view, is a serious indictment against the Justin Trudeau government. And the concerns regarding the culture of fear is extremely disturbing for the professional public servants. That has expanded under Justin Trudeau by 40%. 2015, he promised to cut back on external consultants, yet for the fiscal year of last year, Ottawa spent $15.7 billion on external consultants, totally bypassing the professional public service, an 88% increase. So I wanted to raise that as a concern. Now, sir, based on your years of experience in financial matters, accounts from your members, the RCMP commissioner testifying they are investigating ArriveCan, the AG report, PSPC officials claiming they are sufficiently suspicious of criminal activity surrounding the ArriveCan procurement process, documented evidence of forgery and potential fraud, and the mountain of media reporting. Sir, do you believe, in light of everything that I have presented to you, and I'm sure that you have been listening to and reading on your own, do you believe that there is a strong element of criminal wrongdoing in the ArriveCan?
I unfortunately couldn't comment on that. It's not my area of expertise. I can tell you based on the findings of the Auditor General, there was a clear lack of respect of the financial framework that's put in place.
Do you believe, and have you had any particular direct communication with the ministers responsible for the memberships that you represent?
No.
Okay. Now, you've also read in the newspaper about Mr. Yeo, one of the principals of Dalian, who not only was gainfully employed as a member of the Department of National Defense, but also as a subcontractor. And in this particular case, Mr. Yeo and the other company that he's affiliated with, Daliex, are responsible of receiving upwards to $40 to $50 million in taxpayer funds. Another two-person company, much like GC Strategies. The ability to moonlight as a member of the public service and yet being accused of fleecing the taxpayers at the same time, do you believe that's an isolated incident in the public service?
I would believe so, yes.
You've not heard of any other accounts of this happening?
Not to my knowledge. Now, that's not to say it doesn't exist. Look, if basic due diligence could easily pick this up. As a public servant, you have a code of conduct. There's certain things you're not supposed to do. We have rules in place. We have controls in place to prevent this from happening.
What are your thoughts on ministerial accountability? Because all I've been hearing so far is the minister is completely oblivious. There's a raging firestorm happening in the ministry, and there's a plausible deniability. No one told me, or I didn't bother to ask. How do you feel about ministerial responsibility with this particular scam?
Ministerial responsibility is something that's important. It's something that, like, even at the deputy levels, the buck stops department by department. We need someone who's accountable, right? But organizations such as, like, for example, PSPC, ESDC, and D&D, we're talking about hundreds of millions, billions of dollars. This is very difficult for one person to be at the top. That's why we need financial officers to do their job of due diligence, financial stewardship, to protect these deputy ministers in order for it to allow them to do their job. You can't have one person that's verifying every single transaction, right? Due diligence is important. And our members can help specifically with that task to ensure that the taxpayers' money is being not only accounted for, but being well spent.
Do you think it's a function of incompetence at the deputy ministerial level, or is there an active attempt by ministers to shield themselves from this raging firestorm of fleecing the taxpayer?
I couldn't speak to that, unfortunately. I wouldn't know.
All right.
$21 billion spent on outside contracting with the NDP Liberal government, looking like they're going to continue that trend. Is that something that concerns your members, that acceleration to levels that are historic?
Yes. Look, there's a time and a place for using consultant. There's nothing inherently wrong when it's done for the right reasons. But when it becomes the de facto practice, this is an issue.
And on the Arrive scam, which we saw both the NDP and the Liberals vote to continue to pour more money into this failed program, two of the highest paid contractors received a combined total of $27 million, with 30% commissions going to 4 people on $27 million. I'm sure that would not meet with the approval of your members, the expenditure of those funds on 4 people instead of investment in more resources, personnel, or training for your members.
I can tell you that had my members seen this, flags have been raised, right? There's something known as price review. So look at an example with a chair. If you're selling a chair to the government of Canada, are you selling me that chair at a price you would normally charge someone else for it, another company? Or are you charging me more because I am the government of Canada? So by doing a simple market comparison, we could say, do these rates make sense? Is the work that you're asking to be performed, does it take that amount of time normally?
And so you talk about flags being raised. These are 2 companies doing $27 million in business with 4 employees. Is that something that would raise red flags?
If my members were consulted and they would have seen that something compared to what it's worth normally in the market, yes, it would have raised the flag. But again, I can't speak to this particular example because I don't know if that's normal or not.
Do you believe that Canadian taxpayers got good value for money with the Arrive Can app?
Can't comment because there's not even a financial record of how much was spent, right? In order to be able to assess value money for Canadians, you need to know exactly how much was spent. And we can't even do based on the Auditor General's report, we can't even identify how much Arrive Can actually cost.
So would you say that there was good financial oversight or project management?
No, there was definitely not good financial oversight.
Have you ever seen a project that has been as mismanaged as this Arrive Can that the Auditor General said she believes cost about $60 million, which I'm sure you would agree is an indictment of the financial record keeping when you have the Auditor General who can't definitively say what the project cost was?
I've never seen something of this nature. And I can tell you for my members, it's very frustrating because if any one of them would have been consulted, we could just let us do our job. This is not, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. This is basic bookkeeping. This is easy to prevent these things.
How long did you work for PSPC for?
Approximately 10 years.
So in your decade of time at PSPC, how often did you see bait and switch, as it was described by the procurement ombudsman, used in contracting?
I myself have seen a few occasions, and I could tell you with our members that have been there as well, that had suspicions. And I say suspicions because, again, we can only know what we see. If we're not seeing all the information, it's difficult for us to make an accurate assessment of the situation. Now, mind you, sometimes that's part of the strategy. If the information is not being flowed through one point of contact, well, we can keep certain people in the dark.
With Arrive Can, it was detailed that it was almost 3/4 of the resources were bait and switch. Did you see anything or hear reports from your members of anything to that level?
Not on my personal experience, no.
And to reports to you by members?
Some members have alluded to it, but again, couldn't prove it.
And why do you think that the government cut your members out of this process? We've heard the Auditor General say that the public health emergency was not a valid excuse to throw the rules out the window. The rules being, the ones that your members operate by every day. So why did they cut you out? And why has there not been a concession? Why hasn't the government conceded that doing that was wrong?
I can't speak to the government's part, but I can tell you, generally speaking, when you are dealing with financial officers and auditors, it can be perceived as lagging in time, right? If you want done something quickly, well, maybe you don't want accountants and auditors in there. However, if you want something done well and for bringing value to the Canadians, you want to have financial officers in there. You want accountability. You want properly documented records. You want people that when they're signing an invoice, they know what they're signing for. So although it could be perceived as saving time, you're not going to save money, that's for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm going to look back at the opinion piece that you wrote back in November of 2021. And in it, you stated, you talked about the familiarity Canadians have with the important work of the Auditor General, but then you go on to observe that it's the 6,000 accountants, auditors, and financial management professionals working away in programs and departments who are tasked with ensuring public funds are spent appropriately in the first place. Does this include CFOs?
Our members don't represent CFOs. We don't represent CFOs, no. However, the Auditor General often looks after the fact, right? We only look at the past. Our members, if they're positioned well and the front end, we can prevent blunders from happening in the first place.
Thank you. It is my understanding that chief financial officers are responsible, or they have a procurement organization that works under them, and that they actually sign off on funding requests. Is that their role?
Correct.
Thank you very much. You also made a statement in your article. You stated that the staffing system as it currently exists rewards and prioritizes those who know how to work the system, not those who are most qualified and capable. Can you explain what you mean by work the system? Yeah,
certainly. And I don't think it's any secret. Generally speaking, if you work with numbers, you tend to be more of a, not necessarily a people person. So, remember you're an introvert. And I say this because we got members that do fantastic work. However, they're not necessarily the most popular when it comes to being sociable or interacting with their coworkers or going out or getting making a name for themselves. And so often what happens is people that get promoted is, well, who is liked? Who is someone that I get along with, right? And often maybe you don't get along with an accountant that's asking you some questions.
Right. Thank you. In their testimony before the OGO committee, Bottler AI raised the issue of kickbacks. And then again this week on CTV, they alleged that there have been bribes. Do you have any concerns about this or about any potential criminality?
I've never witnessed kickbacks. I haven't heard any members raise kickbacks, so I can speak to that effect. However, it's always a possibility. And again, that's why you have a code of ethics. That's why you have internal rules. That's why you monitor transactions to the best of your abilities. You can never eliminate risk, but you can reduce the risk. You can mitigate the risk. You can ensure that proper controls are put in place to reduce the probabilities of things like this happening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have a minute. Okay, so you had responded to one of my colleagues that one way of ensuring that the door is not open to fraud is having the proper controls in place. Do you believe that the CFO at the CBSA did his or her job in ensuring that public funds were spent appropriately on the ArriveCan application?
I couldn't comment to this about the CFO. I can tell you someone did not. I don't know who that person was, but someone did not do their job. There's accountability. And if you follow the money, if you follow the paper trail, you'll find out who that is. But when there is no paper trail, when there is no electronic documents, it makes it very difficult to find out where was the crack in the armor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Sidhu, you have the floor for 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Richard, your testimony. Mr. Richard, you talked about, someone need to be accountable, but what kind of the new protection for whistleblowers would you recommend, which do not already exist? And you already gave some recommendation, but which one you really want to should be there?
Well, I'll tell you, there's already a task force working on this right now, and we have someone on the committee. There's a report from OGO that was on there in 2017. There are multiple measures that we can do, but I think the most important one is, and I've mentioned it, you've got to generally, a whistleblower needs to know that when they speak up, they will be protected, because you cannot jeopardize your career, your livelihood. Imagine the stress you're being put through when you did the right thing, you spoke up, and all of a sudden, everyone is attacking you. You ask yourself, should I have done this? You might regret this decision for the rest of your life. The most important one of all the recommendations is find a way to protect the whistleblower.
Yesterday, Jamil Javani, who's a common sense conservative from Durham, was elected in a landslide victory, receiving an absolute majority with a whopping 57% of the popular vote. Now, his nearest rival, who only eked out 22.5% of the vote, had a visit from the PSPC minister to give him some help, to help him get that 22%. Now, I don't know what help he's going to be to the PSPC minister, and I have a question for our witness about that. But I am excited that Mr. Giovanni, of course, is going to help common sense conservatives axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. Now, Mr. Richard, when you were a financial advisor at PSPC, you obviously gained quite an understanding of operations in that department. Now, the minister for PSPC, new to her role last summer, claimed that she was never briefed on ArriveCan, no information. $60 million-ish, because there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of pages of documents that we believe have been destroyed, but we aren't able to prove that they existed because the Auditor General can't get her hands on them. Is it believable that a minister wouldn't have been briefed on this? And if so, would it then tell you that it was deliberate that the information wasn't briefed up to the minister? How does that come to pass that a project of this nature wouldn't have been presented to the minister?
Was she briefed on or not? I couldn't speak to that. I can tell you that if my members detect any anomalies, something that needs to be raised, they'll raise it. Now, they don't raise it necessarily to the minister's level because there's many layers before we get there, right? Again, we don't represent executives. However, we do represent members, financial professionals. That is their duty, their responsibility, if they are presented with information that makes no sense to them, that they will escalate. But they wouldn't go directly, skips 3 or 4 levels. There's a chain of command that we have to respect.
So some of the information that we know now has been accumulated over nearly 2 years since this was first escalated and raised by conservatives. And so your members would have seen some of this information. Now, would any of that get fed into their reporting workflow? What they've understood to come to pass, and then that information would get passed up to their managers and to the ADM, minister? What's the formal process? Or now, because it's coming out only through reports from independent officers to Parliament, it only goes to the minister, and your members don't interact with the information?
Generally speaking, if we were to follow the formal process of how things are supposed to operate, my members would have been involved on the front end, right? Not on the back end, or the front end. And then, had they seen anomalies, and maybe they were involved and they didn't see anomalies. However, based on our survey that we did, I can tell you that for this project, a lot more of my members should have said, yes, we were consulted, we're involved. So based on the limited available of information that I have based on the survey that we did, I can tell you that not enough of our members were consulted or kept apprised of the situation throughout this process.
Thank you very much. That is your time.
Thank you very much, Chair. And just to go back to something that my colleague said about the Durham election, 27% of the population voted, out of which 57% were so greatly voting for, I forget the candidate's name, sorry.
Jamil Javani, the next MP for Durham.
Mr. Barrett, turn your microphone off. Mr. Barrett.
Please turn your microphone off, Chair. It is my turn. I didn't interrupt you.
That is noted. Ms. Khalid, the floor is yours again.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. So it really goes to say how much misinformation is really propagated through the Conservatives. I mean, just right now, again, I'm sure that they'll make a clip out of it. They'll say, X, Y, Z, they did this and they did this and corruption, all of that. I've had to deal over the past 24 hours with a lot of hate mail, with a lot of threats to my own person based on disinformation spread by the Conservatives. So I'm just leading to a question here. When we really propagate that disinformation that, oftentimes our Conservative members are leading, whether it's with respect to vaccines, whether it's respect to the purpose of an ArriveCan app, whether it's respect to how our CBSA operates, how our public service operates. How do members deal with that? And what kind of punishment do they receive from that disinformation that the Conservatives love to spread on them?
I'm not sure I get the question there. Sorry. Could you repeat that? I'm not sure I followed the question.
Let me ask you, how does disinformation campaigns really impact the members that you serve, the members of our CBSA and our public service, whether it is in relation to anti-vaccine campaigns or Arrive scam, whatever they call it, campaigns, and just dealing with the general public in providing the service to Canadians?
I can say this. Whatever happens in the media or at a political level finds its way down to our members, right? Remember, our members are in the trenches. They're not senior management. They're the doers of the work. They see the numbers, the financial statements. It can be sometimes difficult to tie what are we trying to achieve at a very high level versus what they're saying, right? So if we're saying we believe in integrity and values are important and we need to do due diligence and value for money, well, when you see a report like from the Auditor General, it makes our members very frustrated because this whole thing could have been prevented had we just adhered to the existing financial framework. So
could it have been prevented in that, I just want to clarify, in that we spent too much money, or that this app was a waste of time, or that the whole COVID was a conspiracy? Like, where are we on the spectrum here?
I couldn't speak to the amount of money, how much this should have cost. All I can tell you is basic fundamentals in accounting, best practices, were not respected here. So at the end of the day, had our members been allowed to do their jobs, all this wouldn't have happened.
And do you think that Mr. Trudeau was the reason why your members were not able to have their due diligence done on this app?
I don't know who's accountable. I don't know. There's not enough evidence to suggest. Again, we would normally follow the paper trails, but unfortunately there are no paper trails.
And that is the time.